Hello, good day and best wishes to all of you, participants and also speakers and also exhibitors of the IC 2020. My presentation today entitles Policies on Special Needs Persons and Education and International Perspective and Country Initiatives. But before that, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Professor Dr. Sufean Hussin, the President of National Association of Special Education, Malaysia, as well as holding position as the Vice Chancellor of University College Fairview, and also one of the directors of Fairview International Schools, Malaysia. The purpose of my presentation is to provide a guiding framework for caretakers as well as caregivers of special needs services and also facilities in Malaysia in setting the proper and also the correct directions in the future for us to plan and also to make programs and as well as introduce new initiatives so that we are in line with international benchmarks and also best practices. So that is the purpose of my presentation. So far, nobody gave us that guiding framework. So I took the liberty of making a presentation, and it will serve a beneficial purpose for agencies, government agencies, as well as private enterprises dealing with services and also caregivers of special needs education, particularly in Malaysia. Next, please. As for the introduction, I found that in many countries that I Googled, I managed to find that one particular landmark that has been used as a guiding framework for many countries in making policies as well as making plans and also providing services according to the international conventions on the rights of persons with disabilities and optional protocol by the United Nations in 2008. This is the major point that I found when searching through many countries. So the aspects of the articles enumerated in the convention have indeed laid down the benchmarks and best practices for all countries in the United Nations to follow and implement. The second part of my presentation then gave some brief case examples of several countries in enacting and implementing their policies concerning special needs persons. This is to give an indication of the extent and also progress made by certain governments in assuring inclusivity and in providing quality services and facilities to special needs persons in various age groups. Next, please. So, I would like to go more specifically into the contents of the international convention, which will become our benchmark here in Malaysia as well in some developing countries. So the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, United Nations 2008, is an international human rights treaty on of the United Nations, that is intended to protect the rights and also dignities of persons with disabilities. State parties, or I may say country representatives to this convention, are required to promote, protect, and also ensure the full enjoyment of human rights by persons with disabilities and ensure that persons with disabilities enjoy full equality under the law. And also the convention serves as a major catalyst in the global disability rights movement, enabling a shift from viewing persons with disabilities as objects of charity, medical treatment, and social protection towards viewing them as full and equal members of society with human rights. The convention was the first UN human rights treaty of the 21st century. Next, please. The rights, freedom, and effective participation. The purpose of the said convention is to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. Persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, and sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and also effective participation in society on equal basis with others. Next, please. So the center point here is the equalization of opportunities. The convention recognizes that disability is an evolving concept, and that disability results from the interaction between persons with impairments and attitudinal and environmental barriers that hinders their full and effective participation in society on equal basis with others. The convention also recognizes the importance of the principles and policy guidelines contained in the World Programme of Action concerning disabled persons and in the standard rules on the equalization of opportunities for persons with disabilities, in influencing the promotion, the formulation, and the evaluation of policies, plans, programs, and actions at the national, regional, and international levels to further equalize opportunities for persons with disabilities. Next, please. Now come to the important principle, the general principles which have been agreed by member countries of the convention. The principles of the convention shall be, number one, or A, is respect for the inherent dignity and also individual autonomy, including the freedom to make one's own choices and independence of person. So number two is about non-discrimination. And number three is regarding full and effective participation and inclusion of special needs people in the society. Again, number four is respect. But this one is respect for the difference and also acceptance of persons with disabilities as part of human diversity and humanity. Then number five is about equality of opportunity in many aspects of life. And number six is about accessibility. And number seven is equality between men and women. There is no discrimination in this regard. And number eight is regarding respect again for the evolving capacities of children with disabilities and respect for the right of children with disabilities to preserve their identities. These are the general principles. Okay, next. And therefore, any government in the United Nations and any government in the world should attempt to adopt all appropriate legislative and then administrative as also other measures for the implementation of the rights recognized by the convention. And number two, any government in the United Nations should attempt to take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to modify or abolish existing laws, regulations, customs, and practices that constitute discrimination against persons with disabilities. And here is quite difficult for some countries to ratify this convention, but they agree, by principle, they agree about this convention. But to make appropriate changes to their legislation is quite difficult. And number three, any government should attempt to take into account the protection and the promotion of human rights of persons with disabilities in all policies, especially regarding social welfare policies or employment policies, and also to consider them in whatever public programs. And number four, any government should attempt to refrain from engaging in any act or practice that is not consistent with the present convention, and to ensure that public authorities and institutions act in conformity with the present convention. And this is also quite difficult for some countries to ratify the content of this convention. And number five, any government should attempt to take all appropriate measures to eliminate discrimination on the basis of disability by any person, organization, or private enterprise. Next, please. And also, any government should attempt to undertake or promote research and development of universally designed goods, services, equipment, and facilities. This is rather easy because there are many industries who are conducting research and development projects for improving the quality of technology, the quality of equipment, as well as services. This one is readily accepted by many countries. And then next is to undertake, promote research and development of, and also to promote the availability and use of new technologies. And H is to provide accessible information to persons with disabilities about mobility aids, devices, assistive technologies, including new technologies, as well as other forms of assistance, support, services, and facilities. Here, at the forefront is United States of America. They have in their laws regarding this matter, there is providing accessible information through assistive technology as well as new technologies, especially the digital technology. And then any government should attempt to promote the training of professionals and also staff working with persons with disabilities in the rights recognized in the present convention so as to better provide assistance and services guaranteed by those rights. And this one, all countries, including Malaysia, have this policy in place. Okay, next, equal accessibility. On the issue of equal accessibility, the convention states that it is to enable persons with disabilities to live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life, and therefore any government shall take appropriate measures to ensure persons with disability the access on equal basis with others to the physical environment. There is, for example, schools, universities, colleges. The physical environment must be accessible on equal basis. And also to transportation. For example, buses also should make a modification so that special needs persons have equal access to using public transportation, as well as to information and also communications, including communication technology or ICT system, and to also other facilities and services open or provided to the public. anything provided to the public must be on equal basis with people with special needs people. And the measures which shall include the identification and elimination of obstacles and barriers to accessibility. That means there must be a committee, or a commission, or a council that do the identification process and also make suggestions to the government regarding the obstacles and also barriers to accessibility for special needs people. And the measures shall apply to building, roads, transportation, and other outdoor and indoor facilities, including stadium, schools, housing, medical facilities, and workplaces. And also regarding the provision of information, communications, and other services, as well as the use of electronic gadgets, as well as emergency services. Okay, next, please. Specific measures and action plans that need to be taken by government or state parties should also take appropriate measures regarding aid to develop, promulgate, and monitor the implementation of minimum standards and guidelines for the accessibility of facilities and services open and provided to the public. I think Malaysia needs to improve a lot in this area. We need some kind of council that makes studies regarding the standards and also guidelines for accessibilities in all matters. That is any services provided to the public. And then B, to ensure that private entities that offer facilities and services which are open and provided to the public on equal basis. And C is any government should take appropriate measures to provide training for stakeholders on accessibility issues facing persons with disabilities. And D is to provide in buildings and other facilities open to the public signage in Braille and in an easy to read and understand forms. What I can find here in Malaysia, most lifts in Malaysia, in public buildings, in government buildings, in private buildings as well, I could see that there is Braille character printed on the keys that we can find in the lift to assist people with visual impairment to make use of that facility. But in many other cases, I don't find. But in the university, some universities, they have this what we call electronic device that can be used to guide and visually impaired people to go around the campus. This one is a good move. Okay, next. Specific measures, again, as a continuation. Any government should provide forms of life assistance and intermediaries, including guides, readers, and professional sign language interpreters to facilitate accessibility to buildings and other facilities open to the public. And this one, I think Malaysia and some or many countries need to have this policy in place, that is to have security personnel to help to guide people with disabilities in terms of accessibility to any buildings. And then F, to promote other appropriate forms of assistance and support to persons with disabilities to ensure their access to information. And also G, to provide access for persons to ICT technology. And H is to promote design, development, production, and distribution of accessible ICT and an early stage so that this technology become accessible at a minimal cost. Next, please. And any government shall enable persons with disabilities to learn life and social development skills to facilitate their full and equal participation in education as well as members of the community. So, in regard to this matter, government should put in place facilitating the learning of Braille and also new formats of communication and the use of the learning of sign language and also the promotion of linguistic identity for the deaf community, and as well as ensuring the education of persons with several disabilities in the most appropriate languages, modes, and means of communication. And also provide environments which can maximize academic and social development of special needs persons. Next, please. And with regard to that, in order to help ensure the realization of this right, government agencies shall take appropriate measures to employ teachers, including teachers with disabilities who are qualified in sign language or Braille, and to train professionals and staff who work at all levels of education. Such training shall incorporate disability awareness and the use of appropriate augmentative and alternative modes, means and formats of communication, educational techniques, and materials to support persons with disabilities. Next, please. Now come to the case example of country initiatives. First is regarding Malaysia's initiatives, what we have done in the past decades regarding special needs services and facilities as well as education. Effort in Malaysia towards fulfilling the needs of special needs people starts with Salamanca Convention that is organized by UNESCO in 1994, and the resolutions that were formulated have been the cornerstone and also the beacon in Malaysia in raising awareness among the Malaysian public and also in government agencies on the necessity to provide appropriate services and facilities for special needs children and youth based on the principles of justice and equality for all. That is the promotion and also development of special needs services and also education in Malaysia. It begins with the Salamanca Convention. And then we also, in Malaysia, we have inclusive education and also integrated programs that is implemented by the Ministry of Education, Malaysia, and also by many NGOs established special schools that are dedicated for a specific type of disabilities. However, I think much needs to be done for the development and also well-being of the 3% of the disadvantaged population. And UNICEF, Malaysia estimates that there are around 440,000 persons in the age of 0 to 14 years old disabilities in Malaysia. Next, please. And Malaysia, in terms of legislation, Malaysia legislated the Person with Disabilities Act in the year 2008 to legally enact the provision of services and facilities by all ministries and also government agencies, particularly the Ministry of Education. Article 28 of the Act affirms that special needs children are to be given necessary support to facilitate their full and equal participation in education. And then, based on international best practices and current national policy, the Malaysian Ministry of Education is committed to moving more students with special needs toward the inclusive education program and raising the overall quality of the provision. The Malaysian Education Blueprint 2013-2025 outlines the action plan for inclusive education for the purpose of improving access in preschool education and also in establishing inclusive education program initiative. And then in Malaysia also, we have private sector initiatives, which is very encouraging here in Malaysia, where children with special needs in Malaysia are now more fortunate as more and more facilities and resources are available in Malaysia for disabilities, especially in the areas of cognition and learning difficulties, behavioral, emotional, and social difficulties, communication and interaction difficulties, sensory and physical difficulties. The increasing demand has initiated the setting up of specialized centers that offer fully integrated as well as multidisciplinary therapy services to support individuals with developmental delays. Next, please. Next case example is Australia, which is in the southern hemisphere. Malaysia is in the middle of the globe. Now we go to Australia, the southern hemisphere, to see what they have done. What are the initiatives that Australia has taken up? The Commonwealth and the state and the territory governments have enacted legislation to protect the rights and interests of people with disabilities in Australia. The Commonwealth State Disability Agreement, CSDA, was established in 1991. And nowadays, the Commonwealth State Territory Disability Agreement also in place. It provides the framework within which Australia, the Commonwealth of Australia and its jurisdictions aim to protect the interests of people with a disability and is supported by a range of Commonwealth legislative provisions. And then the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child also applies to children and young people with disabilities. So in this regard, Australia make use of the United Nations Convention on the rights of child and also on the rights of special needs people. Okay? So in the next slide, we can see that Australia and also its state governments provided fund to also non-government agencies to provide services for people with disability. Funding regimes and service delivery regimes vary across jurisdiction, that is, vary from state to state. The CSTDA purposes include providing a national framework to underpin specialist disability services across Australia. So it means Australia has these services, that is specialist disability services. And also in Australia, they are outlining a means for measuring and also publicizing the progress of governments toward achieving the national framework. And also, policy-wise, Australian government is outlining the respective and collective roles and responsibilities of state governments in planning, policy setting, and also policy management of specialist disability services, and also providing accountability mechanism or the monitoring mechanism, and also the auditing mechanism regarding government funding for special needs services. And then in Australia, they have disability standards for education. This is in the field of education. They have disability standards for education 2005, which clarify and elaborate the legal obligations of education authorities in all states, and also legal obligations of education providers across the whole of education, including kindergartens, school, vocational colleges, and also in colleges and also universities. The standards seek to ensure that students with disability can access and participate in education on the same basis as other students. Next, please. The Disability Standards for Education 2005 also intended to give students with disability the same rights as other students. The standards state that all students should be able to enjoy their education and be treated with dignity. The standards aim to overcome any kinds of discrimination and also stereotypes regarding the abilities of students with disabilities. Special needs in education in Australia has an inclusive approach, similar to Malaysia in many aspects, where a child attends a school in general, wherever possible. Education providers are required by the law to make reasonable adjustment to allow a student with disabilities to be educated on the same basis as other students. And in Australia, special education is delivered in several ways, in regular classrooms with a modified curriculum or additional teaching support. And then the second one is special small classes with a regular school, within a regular school, and then the placement in a special school. Okay, next please. Now we go to the Western Hemisphere. There is USA initiatives. We can see that the United Nations, as well as many countries, either in Europe or in Asia, have been following what we call initiatives made by USA in many ways, especially in terms of legislation that have taken place in the USA, and then these kind of legislations are borrowed by other countries. The American with Disabilities Act, this one is the first law. This is a civil liberty law and also civil rights law, which became law in 1990. And the other is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination in any aspects of life, including work, in education, in transportation, in employment, in private places as well. The purpose of the law is to make sure that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone. And then the next one is education. In terms of education, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. This is the famous law which has been borrowed by many countries. This EHA, frequently referred to as Public Law 94-142, and this was passed in 1975. And that is way before the Disability Act. And this EHA, Education for Handicapped Children, requires that all public schools, beginning 1975 onwards, that have federal grants or receive federal grants, must provide equal access to education for children with physical, mental, and also mental disabilities. And therefore, they will continue to receive federal funding for special education. And until today, this law provides funding for not only schools, but also colleges and universities in America. This is the Education Act for special needs people. Okay, next please. Essentially, this public law was enacted to meet 4 key goals. Number 1, to ensure that special education services are available to children who need them. And then to guarantee the decisions about services to students with disabilities are fair and appropriate. This requires strict enforcement agencies if it is going to work, which is rather difficult for America, which is a big country. And then number 3 is to establish specific management and auditing requirements for special education. Usually this is the case. When any agencies or any schools receive government funding, they will be subjected to a strict auditing process. And then the next one is to provide federal funds to have states educate students with disabilities. The Individual with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, was passed in 1990, and the following are some of the points in IDEA. There is public schools required to create individualized education program, or IEP. And these have been done, I think, for the past 30 years. It is common knowledge in America, and Malaysia also are following suit with this program. Malaysia is also implementing this policy. And the second one is to the maximum extent. IDEA should ensures that all students are given the opportunity to learn in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. And that is an inclusive classroom environment in which a special needs student can achieve the most academic success. And then IDEA also ensures that free, appropriate public education of faith is an educational right that ensures education and related services are designed to meet a handicapped person's individual needs as adequately as the needs of non-handicapped person. So it is also a common practice that when a law is to be enforced with quality and also with high standards, there are some agencies being established to monitor, to supervise, as well as to evaluate the implementation of the policies. Okay, so the next one is, next slide please. And originally, as stated in 1998, there is a new law. There is the Assistive Technology Act that was passed in 2004 in America, and it provides assistive technology to persons with disabilities so they can more fully participate in education, in employment, and also in daily activities on level playing fields with other ordinary people in communities. And it is because technology plays an increasingly important role in our lives today, where we are living in digital world, and therefore many equipments are electronic equipments that have 4G or 5G technology. Okay, next please. So that are the 3 cases. So as a conclusion, I would like to assert, I would like to affirm that in any country, the well-being and the welfare of special needs person does not solely lie in the hands of the government and also on private agencies alone. Rather, it greatly depends on literacy, on awareness, on compassion within the family and also within local community. The philosophy is simple. If we were in pain, then we knew what and where the pain was, instead of calling others to tell what was wrong with us. So only people who are ignorant, illiterate, and lacking compassion will bully, will feel ashamed, and put into seclusion people with special needs. And this have been, the case of many countries, even in the so-called advanced countries. This thing happened, where bullying and also denial happen, when it is concerned with special needs children or people with disabilities. And then I conclude also that in a highly civilized society, the well-being and also the welfare of everyone depends on the blending of human compassion, kindness, knowledge, as well as sharing of resources. The International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, an optional protocol by the United Nations in 2008, has laid down the benchmarks and also the best practices for all countries in the United Nations to follow and implement. So thank you for listening and also for participating in this talk as well as in IC 2020. All the best to all of you, and I hope you are going to or you have secured a lot of information and also gain a lot of knowledge by participating in this IC 2020 exhibition and also ecosystem. Thank you very much.